So good evening, everybody, and welcome to Theater Resources Unlimited. This is our June panel, Life on Hold and What We Do in the Meantime. I've got some terrific people here to talk about how they're dealing with COVID right now artistically. I've got Markus Potter from NewYorkRep, Jim Morgan from New York Theater, and commercial producer Jim Kierstead. We're going to talk about how producers are spending their time right now. Are they reading new plays? Are they looking for new works? Are they planning for the future? Do they have any specifics yet? I don't think we know enough yet, but maybe you have some specific ideas about how you're going to bring those projects that are on hold back into the world once we're able to actually get together in non-isolated situations and social gatherings. So I just want to get right to the to my panelists. I'm very proud to have them and very pleased to have them in the room. I'd like to basically thank the Jim and Markus.
Two Jims are better than one. Yes.
I was actually going to do three Jims, but I couldn't find a third one that was worthy of your company. So Markus was the one who sort of came to the surface and said, yes, he is somebody that we must talk to. So that's all exaggeration. Markus, why don't you actually say hi to everybody and tell us a little bit about your background? I think you may have done some of it in the intros, but you can take a little bit more time and tell us about NewYorkRep and your history.
Yeah, sure. Well, welcome everyone. Once again, great to see so many familiar faces. Just a quick background on how I arrived at this moment in this world. I was an actor in the Bay Area, went to graduate school at Columbia University at the time as an actor. I had some wonderful mentorship with Anne Bogart when I was there as a director, and then slowly transitioned into directing after graduate school. And directing led me to artistic leadership. I founded NewYorkRep, which has the mission of developing and producing innovative new plays and musicals that inspire and compel social change. So directing brought me to NewYorkRep, and now I vacillate between freelance directing, artistic leadership, and I also have a university position at the University of Kansas. So I'm currently splitting time between New York and Kansas City, and just like so many of you, asking a lot of questions about where we are as a country, as a society, as an institution, as an artist. You know, I think this is some of the positives of this nightmare that we're in, is having some moment, at least some of us do, to have that introspection of trying to figure out why we do what we do, rather than going through the motions on a daily basis and missing deadlines and not being able to get to a certain script that we're supposed to read, but really getting back to the heart of why the hell are we here? So that's my quick overview. But again, great to see so many of you, and I'm excited to learning from you all as well.
Thank you guys for being with us. Jim Kierstead, tell us a little bit about what you're up to and what your background.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Bob. And it's so nice when I got to see all these great faces. It was so nice to recognize so many people looking really well too. So basically, when this shut down, I had a show in Chicago that I was just finishing up called The Adult in the Room. It was about Nancy Pelosi, one-woman show. So we had a nice run out there at the Victory Gardens Theater through the month of February, and we're going to be at 59th 59th this summer.
Say the title again. I don't think everybody heard it.
I'm sorry, say again?
Say the title again.
It's called The Adult in the Room, and it's the story about Nancy Pelosi and how she got to be speaker. So it's a super cool show. We have this great actress named Orla Cassidy who starred in it, and it did great out there. We had a wonderful time, and we were going to do it off-Broadway this summer. So as a result of COVID, that shut down, and then I was in the middle of openings of, I think, 6 shows for Broadway this spring, and we just went from, everything was such a great season. It was part of Company and The Minutes and Lehman Trilogy and Mrs. Doubtfire, a couple other ones, and we just kind of shut down. So I'm somebody who likes to be a co-producer on projects, and I also like to develop my own work. So I have those two facets going on. I'm also involved in film and television and whatnot. So what I ended up doing was I have a 30-year background in IT. I was the CIO for a company for 32 years, and I've been working in theater for about 20 now. So after being really sad for 2 weeks and watching TV and
Just
not knowing quite what to do, I decided that one night I said, you know what, I'm going to start a company, and it's going to be all about how we can incorporate technology into theater and the development process. And you know, a lot of people, if you ask people years ago, you know, can you bring theater in and film theater, they'll laugh at you and say that's not a really good way. Theater's not meant to be filmed, it's meant to be seen live. And I totally agree with that. But I also think that there's a place for it. And I think that what's been really interesting during this process is, for me, I know I had the opportunity to break all my habits. It was almost being in like a rehab, you know, like anything that you were doing that you didn't want to do, but you just did it because it was something that was in your life every day. I realized I could just stop, and I had to stop. So it gave me a lot of time to think and reevaluate, you know, my life and my priorities, and, you know, what I wanted to do now and going forward, and some of the things I knew that I wanted to return to, and some of the things I knew I probably didn't want to return to. And when I started coming up with this company, it was really with the focus of how can we function now? Because when this pandemic hit and we were shut down for the 2 weeks, people were thinking like, oh good, we're going to shut down for 2 weeks and we're going to open. And, you know, I wish, as an optimist, I was, you know, if I was being an optimist about it, I would say, I think that's great, 2 weeks, sure. And then I was like, there's no way it's 2 weeks. It's going to be forever. It's not going to be a month or 2 months or even 6 months. It's going to be a long time. And I said, what are we going to do in the meantime? So for me, what I realized was, as a result of this, people are really embracing Zoom and teleconferencing and all these technologies because people are forced to work at home. It's a very isolating disease because people don't get to see their families and their loved ones. So the only way they can keep in contact is these technologies, where, you know, 6 months ago, if you said to my parents, oh, you want to get on a Zoom meeting? They'd be like, I don't even know what that is. I don't know how to do that, and I have no interest in doing it. And now everybody's learned how to do this. So it's really kind of fun, because that was another boundary that was in the way of people using this technology in their development of theater, because just nobody really was that familiar how to do it. And, you know, in the beginning, it was kind of exciting to see people say, we're going to do a Zoom reading. And there's a lot of ways to do a Zoom reading, and some of them are horrible. In fact, most of them are horrible. But I appreciated that, you know, the excitement and people's commitment to keeping their theater projects going. So during that time, during those first number of weeks when I was creating this company, I investigated all the different platforms. I investigated all the best practices. I tried to figure out like how to make it so people weren't going in and out and getting frozen. And you know, is Zoom the best one, or was there another one that was a better one? So, you know, I really investigated all that. And then when I created the process, you know, all these ways of doing things are coming up. So far as a play isn't too bad to do. But there's always those technological glitches that happen, you know, so you don't want your actor freezing up in the middle of the show. So I realized it's better to record it, you know, even if you're doing it, unless it's just a group of people meeting, it's better to record it. Yes.
I want to bring Jim Morgan in first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking.
We're doing an overview, then we'll get to specific.
Apologies.
That's okay. Jim Morgan, I know that York is working assiduously to maintain visibility in the community. I know that you're doing all sorts of interesting online things to engage your audiences, but tell us a little bit about your background with York and bring us up to date.
Well, we're in the middle of our 50th anniversary season. Jim is on our board. Joan mentioned that she is the president of our board. So we're well represented here. I've been involved for 46 of the 50 years. So all this happened in the middle of our 50th anniversary celebration. And it's how to move on, try to make sense of all this. As Markus was saying, in a way, it's a wonderful time to take stock, and in all sorts of ways. I've been doing a lot of cooking. I've wanted to really cook for a while, and never really thought I had the time. And now I've had the time, and I'm fact, I have something that I have to go check in the oven soon. But anyway, we're trying to figure out going forward what this all means to us, well, just what going forward means. We are doing a lot of stuff online. We have found it very difficult to do. We have all sorts of virtual, we have all sorts of, what's the word?
Recorded?
Sorry?
Recorded?
Recorded, yeah, but there's a word,
Zoom?
Archival videos that we would like to put out there and that we offered to put out for nothing just to get the work out there. There's some incredible performances and wonderful work, and it's been very difficult dealing with various unions who haven't quite figured out what all this means. Understandably, it's a very difficult thing, but they've made it extremely difficult. So far, that has not happened. And if it could happen, it would be prohibitively expensive. So we're trying to work around all that, which is why we came up with this idea of a series of conversations about notable shows from our past. And that has gone over wonderfully. It's sort of a virtual cast reunion, and sometimes includes actual...
One moment.
Sorry.
Okay.
That was my phone. Sometimes it includes actual musical performances, sometimes video clips from the performance itself. We've had some wonderfully emotional shows that, revisiting of shows that just brought it all back, but also spoke to everything that's happening today. We had one 2 weeks ago with the cast of our production of Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cope from 4 or 5 years ago. A wonderful group of people, wonderful show. I'm going to pitch it out there to any producer who's interested. I would love to do a full production of it. It deserves it. And Mickey Grant is with us and feistier than ever and deserves it. And that cast was incredible. But anyway, the emotions that came out of that about what is going on today was wonderful. We had another equally touching one about Desperate Measures a few weeks before that. And the feelings that come out of these people who just want to relate to audiences, I think, relate to each other. It's like all of us, we're starved for seeing people and talking to people and expressing ourselves. And so I'm going to keep talking for about an hour now.
No, I'll stop you. What I wanted to jump in and say that to clarify the different areas we're covering right now, some of us are talking or thinking in terms of doing virtual performances, live stream performances. Jim is talking about the fact that doing these isolated performances live is difficult. He finds that it's easier to record them and make them more polished in post-production. What?
Not quite what I was talking about.
Jim Kierstead.
Archival recordings of shows that we have already done that are ready to go, that we would love to share with the world. We are not against at all doing live performances, but doing live musical performances is very tricky, as various people have alluded to.
I was referring to Jim Kierstead, but
I'm sorry.
Then I was going to go to the fact that you were talking about archival performances.
Yes.
And Markus, we actually haven't heard some of your initiatives yet, but we'll get to those in a second. So some of the things that you're doing are things like trivia night. You're talking about talkbacks with casts from previous shows. All of that is very, very well suited to this format. Basically, I'm doing a panel. I've got three people and me talking, and we've got 4 frames in the screen, and it's very easy for people to follow this. We don't have to pretend that we're not in the same room together. We know that we're in different rooms. When you're doing a show, some sort of reading of a new play, or God help us, a new musical, that's a whole other conversation. Then we have the situation of how do you give the audiences a feeling of it being a performance with people who are actually relating to each other. So the idea of having to relate in separate rooms is one of the things that we're trying to deal with right now. You've solved it, Jim, in some ways in terms of engaging your audiences in trivia night and the talkbacks that you're doing, the discussions you're doing. Jim Kierstead has created a Broadway Virtual and is doing performances that are recorded and then edited and can be perfected. Markus, tell us a little bit about what your plans are with NewYorkRep.
Yeah, sure. So, just to mention early on when the lockdown first started, I was very resistant about putting anything out there. And there were a lot of robust conversations between the board and I and about what our messaging wanted to be. And there was so much talk about, well, we have to keep the donors engaged. We have to keep our fan base and audiences engaged. And what are we going to do? And I just was able to take stock of where we were and really harken back to the mission, which is producing and developing innovative new work. So if the focus is let's serve our mission rather than let's please our donors, and I would say that for any other not-for-profits in the room or for any other entrepreneur artists in the room, less about ego and how can we get our work out there, but why and what's our purpose, and just really tapping into that to start this conversation, I think is deeply important. So we've been playing the long game and not as worried about putting product out there and doing crappy Zoom presentations. And yes, I know Jim Kierstead is going to crack the code here and create something incredibly exciting. But we know that these pieces are not meant to be taken in Zoom. I haven't been engaged more than 5 minutes in any Zoom presentation. So in terms of development, we're part of the Play at Home group with the Public and Woolly Mammoth and St. Louis Repertory, commissioning these Play at Home works where writers are asked to write a short play or musical in a week. It's available for the public to download and read at home. We have a few other commissions, and we're launching a new series in the fall, commissioning 6 writers to talk about race in America and creating an inclusive anti-racist climate, and going to have some town hall discussions surrounding the work. So really it's how can we serve the community? How can we worry less about our bottom line and about keeping the business open and really hearkening back to the mission? That's really what we've been having conversations about right now, last few weeks.
I'd just like to add to what you're saying that your mission, our missions are all, of course, key and crucial. One of the things that is part of my mission and part of all of our missions, I think, is to help our communities get through this. And part of the giving them a sense of this being an acceptable norm, an acceptable new norm, means that they need activities to engage in. They need to have a feeling that the York Theater is there, that the NewYorkRep is there for them, that Jim Kierstead is going to produce another show, God willing. So that's, I just wanted to put that into the conversation, the fact that it's not just what we're doing from our organization point of view, but what we see as our purpose and what we can have as a purpose in terms of helping communities who are actually isolated and feeling isolated and are really hungry for ways to be engaged.
It's such an important point. Yes. How are we serving others, and how are we making a contribution? I echo that wholeheartedly.
So don't think that just because you have a hard time making your works work in virtual, I call it virtual isolated performance. Virtual isolated performance doesn't mean that your fan base, your audience is really. I think they probably want to see you. They want to know you're there. It's comforting. The other thing that I'll point out in terms of this discussion, just to state the obvious, we're dealing with two different aspects of theater here. We're dealing with not-for-profit organizations and what their function is right now during COVID. And Jim Kierstead is the voice of commercial theater. So there's two different kinds of concerns going on here. Jim, let's go to you before we talk about Broadway Virtual, which we'll get back to. Let's talk about you as a commercial producer. What's happened? Well, first of all, is Hadestown going to come back?
Yeah, Hadestown's going to come back, and I think any of the strong shows will come back. And anything that has not started, it depends, right? So if it's a strong musical like Mrs. Doubtfire, that's totally going to come back. That's got, you know, funds behind it. It's got a lot of power behind it. The ones that I'm most concerned about are the plays. You know, it's like we just made the announcement today that The Minutes, which I'm part of, the Tracy Letts play, that was on for a couple of weeks but never actually opened, is going to open. It's going to have its official opening night, hopefully, if things go well, 1 year exactly from when it was supposed to open. So it'll be in March of 21. And that's kind of rare because a lot of the plays that were, you know, limited runs, they're not going to come back again. The people aren't going to be available. You know, it cost them too much to do it because they didn't have a big budget to begin with. So a lot of those guys are going to go by the wayside, and a lot of the musicals that were floundering are going to go by the wayside as well. So it's a rough time. It's a really rough time. It's definitely a survival of the fittest thing.
Markus, given the fact that you're so passionate about wanting to return to your mission, are you at a point yet where you're able to actually have a plan for going forward? Do you know what you might be doing or thinking?
You know, we have a production that was slated for this fall, Chasing Gods by Paris Creighton III, which we're moving to next year at some point. It's just a matter of when things open and when theaters are going to be booked and what the pecking order of that's going to be and when those commitments are going to be made. All of that is, of course, just absolutely in flux. We just don't know until we get more word about what's happening on the ground.
Jim, how about productions that you have in the pipeline right now?
Which Jim?
Jim Morgan. Sorry, I have to remember.
I don't want to make that mistake again. Well, as Markus said, we had a show that was ready to go. It was about to go into rehearsal. It was all cast, designed. We were selling tickets, and a wonderful show. And we will do it as soon as we can. It's called Cheek to Cheek, Irving Berlin in Hollywood, a new musical directed, choreographed, and conceived by Randy Skinner. So that was really exciting. Our friend Ricky Kane Larimer was making it happen with us, and we can't wait to get it up on the stage because it'll be perfect for whenever people are back in theaters. It'll be a wonderfully feel-good musical that's never been done before, and that's what we like to do. I mean, we do many things that are not just feel-good things, but this is true feel-good. It's all a lot of tap dancing, wonderful Irving Berlin songs, one that has never been heard publicly before, and so as soon as we can be back in the theater. And when all this started, we thought, okay, well, June, we'll move it to June. No. And then we thought, well, later in the summer. No. Now we're hoping maybe February. I don't know. But no one can plan. And what's worse, none of us can plan what the ramifications are. How far away do people have to be? And once you fulfill all of those requirements, whatever they end up being, what kind of response will that be for the actors? And what shape will the actors be in on stage? Do they have to be 6 feet apart? You can't do Randy Skinner choreography with everyone 6 feet apart. At least Randy has not told me that that's possible. So there's so much that sadly we have no idea about. So it's great that people are saying, oh yeah, we'll be back by this time. We'll, you know, and someone said to me the other day, well, you just need to open up again and people will come. what? Anyway, it's unlike any of us, and it's unlike anything any of us have ever been through.
Absolutely. I think various polls have demonstrated that audiences are pretty reluctant to come back too quickly. So I think we need to be very cautious about that, conservative. There's a practical situation that we're all dealing with, which is how do we keep our companies alive without sources of revenue? And that's a little different on both sides of it. So Jim Kierstead, I'm going to start with you. You don't have a season, but you have plays and musicals that need to get up there and start selling tickets so that there's some sort of income for you and the companies. What are we doing right now? How are we surviving?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, let me just say that, although I'm a commercial theater producer, I'm really deep rooted with not-for-profits. I mean, I'm on the board of the York for 15 years and the Abingdon and the York Theater Barn, and I really love their mission. I think that not-for-profits are so important. And one of the points about Broadway Virtual, one of the reasons I wanted to do that, and Markus, I 100% agree with you. I don't in any way think that virtual theater should replace live theater. It's not that. It's about how do we go and do something now? Like, what do we do since we can't do what we need to do? It's sort of like, what are we going to do, sit around for a year, do nothing? So what I think is really interesting is the people who were in the best position, if you can be in a best position during this pandemic, is not the people who are running, not the people who are just about to run like Cheek by Cheek and all these other shows that we're just about to open, but the shows that are in a development process. So what I really wanted to do is look at this as a moment where, and that's why Broadway Virtual, one of the things for Broadway Virtual is to help people continue their development during this time. So I'm going to be doing this summer play series this year and working with playwrights of very diverse backgrounds and getting that up there virtually and allowing them to continue their development process and get their work seen and be able to use this time to their advantage, because this actually is time that you can use to your advantage if you don't have a play that's ready to go that minute. So that's something we're really working on. And the other part of Broadway Virtual is, even though it's a for-profit company, there is a altruistic, cultural, community-based feel to it. And one of the things that we do is we work with not-for-profits in order to create content that they can use, because I think that one of the things that Jim and Markus were alluding to before is they were, Jim was talking about bringing out archival video, doing trivia night. They were doing something that keeps themselves in the view of their subscribers, because it's really hard in the beginning. The first couple of weeks, you can go out to your subscribers as a not-for-profit and say, can you give us some money to keep going? But you can't keep doing that. People aren't going to keep doing it after a while. So you've got to change your programming if you can't literally be together in the theater. So that's one of the reasons why these readings and these different events that can be on video are super important. So we're trying to help the not-for-profits. Right now we're doing these monologue series for the Adrienne Arsh Center down in Miami. So we've done about 6 of those so far, and we're going to be doing a new reading on Tuesday at 5:30 of a brand new play we're developing called Jenna and the Whale. And we're going to be doing that down there. We just got a lot of nice press in Miami, and it's on Playbill today and whatnot. So we're doing that, but it's all with the idea of raising money for not-for-profit. So that's going to be benefiting the Soul Project and the Arsh Center, and we're going to do some stuff with the York as well and some of the other places. But I've gotten so many calls about this because people really need that content. And a lot of places don't, the York and I'm sure Markus's theater have technology people, but a lot of theaters really don't have that, and they don't want to reinvent the wheel. And it's much better, and our company will go and help people, just advising as a gift, just to try to get people up and going. And of course, we have the arm that does filming and it does all those other things, and that's more of a for-profit thing, obviously. But the response has been incredible because people want to keep creating their art. So that's what's making me happy and have hope that we can get by this. And when it's over, I hope people will continue to use these tools that we're learning now to progress their development and be able to work with people from all over the world instead of being limited by geography and financial limitations as well. So that's kind of what the company is about. And that's what I'm doing to try to keep this going. So it's more about looking at the shows we're working on developing now and helping those around us in our community and our not-for-profits to keep working rather than just sit around and do nothing.
So Markus, does that suggest to you the possibility of maybe instead of trying to recreate the theater experience, hold on for a second. Stop video, where's your stop video? There it is. Okay, rather than trying to create performances that really are equal to live, which is almost impossible, could this possibly be a useful time for you and your company to start doing developmental readings of works that you have thought about doing, but you really haven't gotten that much involved in? I mean, very early stages. I think you can learn a lot from a virtual reading at like a table read stage or even a stage reading stage. I just want to encourage you to get in there and do it.
Yeah, well, first off, Jim said it best. It's not a replacement. This is what can we do now?
Yes.
And we should be reinvent what is possible right now, and we should go all in on development. My only caution flag is putting stuff out there to put stuff out there because I feel like we have to, and it's not going to compete with Netflix. It's not going to compete with something that's designed for the screen. So as long as your intention going into it, as long as it's, hey, let's develop this. This is for the sake of making the art better. It's not necessarily to entertain, because the product is not necessarily going to be great. I think it can be great. I just think we should be mindful and not just put out masses of product right now. That's my only thing I would add.
From a writer's point of view, from the writers and the artists' point of view, this is a period where they desperately need to feel engaged and part of the business. And I've talked to many writers who are so grateful to be able to do virtual readings of their pieces right now. In fact, they're probably it's probably easier for them to do it now than it has been before. It's certainly the expenses are reduced. We don't have venues that we have to book.
For writers, I'll add to that, Bob. I think there's such value in being able to hear your play, and you have a national pool of actors. You can work with people that you haven't been able to work with before. There's so many doors that are opened. My other slight caution for writers are judging the work based on the Zoom lag. If you have spitfire dialogue, if you have overlapping dialogue that you find is all of a sudden not working and you can't hear certain threads of story, are you judging that based on Zoom, or are you judging what's really on page? So that's something to be super, super mindful about in the development phase that we're in right now.
Well, that's always, we always have to be mindful of that, even in live presentations. We have to, is it a miscast role, or is it the play not working? There are so many variables. Writers are so vulnerable. They're at the mercy of so many variables. I want to acknowledge Ralph Lewis says that when the vaccine is widely available and we go back to seeing live theater, I'm betting that this new live video theater is not going away. And I actually agree with him. I think that this is going to become part of the theater vocabulary. It has become part of the theater vocabulary. It is one of the things that we can use in terms of development and in terms of hearing works. And it is possible to conceive of works that are specifically geared to the limits of what we're doing. So I think live virtual performance or just virtual performance may become its own sub-art form of theater. Do you agree? Does anybody agree or disagree with that? Curious.
I agree very much. And I think that there's been a big fear over the years that if you film theater, people won't go to theater. And I think it's been proven several times. And the biggest example is Chicago. When Chicago was starting to dwindle on Broadway a bit, and they did the film, they figured, oh, Chicago's going to be closed in another month if we do a film. And that it went opposite, because now you created a worldwide brand of something that is very Broadway centric. We're very spoiled. We live in a world where we, live in New York or someplace where we have access to a lot of theater. and we have the money to spend on the theater. And there's so many people in this world who've never seen a theater piece. They've never gone, they don't know what it is. And I think if you can give them something, you know, film obviously is a lot more accessible. So when Chicago, the film got out there, people were like, oh, that's cool. Oh, I want to see that. So then they come to New York and they're like, cool, I want to see the real version of that. I want to see that on stage. How cool would that be? So now all of a sudden, if you can present these pieces in a simpler format and people can afford to buy them, they can afford to pay for them, all of a sudden, if it's a good piece, they'll be like, I want to see that when it comes to me. So I don't think that you're ruining your pool of theater goers by giving them a virtual experience. I think you're building a brand, and then when they have the chance to see it live, they will choose to see it live, and they'll want to spend that money because they had a good time and they want to see the real version. So I'm a real believer in that. I think the two feed each other.
Let's go back to Jim. Go, Jim Morgan.
Well, talking about how the virtual stuff that we're doing now, how it might be applied in the future when hopefully all of this is behind us. I think there are all sorts of things that we will find that we have grown attached to, like these meetings that who would have thought how easy it was to get all these people together, even around the country, on Zoom. But case in point, our education director, Jimmy Ludwig, we do a musical theater training program every summer. And the feeling was, well, we can't get in the theater. It's going to be pretty impossible to do what we've done before. And for a while, we were feeling we can't really do anything. And then he came up with the idea of meshing the musical theater training program. Seth Christenfeld, our literary manager, has been doing it's called Songwriters in Mufti, where songwriters are given a week to write a song on a given topic, and then the audience votes on their favorites. And so Jimmy is using some of the songs from that songwriting series, a competition. He's working with the kids in the MTTP program who are around the country, and he works with them personally. I think they're getting a far more direct teaching experience than they would have if they're in a group of people on our stage. Yes, it's different. There are pluses and minuses, but he's found a whole new way to use the teaching experience with the Zoom, putting it with the Zoom experience, and these songs that are coming in on a weekly basis. It's pretty exciting, and he's very enthused about it. I can't wait to see the results. It'll all be, you'll have videos of it along the way, of the process with each kid. It'll be pretty wonderful, I think.
I'd like to turn to content a little bit, because we touched on that a little. Given what we've been going through with COVID, do you think that, what do you think audiences want to see? What do you think audiences are looking for right now? I've read some things where the answers are surprising, but I won't tell you what I've read. So you tell me what you think. Markus?
Man, so it first depends on the day, right? I mean, there are those moments where all you can do to mutter through life is to laugh. And if you can't laugh in this moment, you're going to go hide in a closet. And there are other moments where you feel like we need to engage with our society, with our community more than ever. So I believe there's a hunger for substance right now, but once we get through this, and I use that with huge amount of quotes, and if there's a vaccine and if we get back to the new normal or a new version of normal, I do think we're going to be in a moment in time where great, quote, entertainment is going to be really sought after. And we are just want to do the newsies and comedy. If it has some hint of a message behind it, if it moves the needle without preaching, yes, but I think we're going to want to laugh pretty damn soon.
I'll tell you about what I read in a second. Jim Morgan.
I'd agree with Markus. I think people are going to want to see cheek to cheek Irving Berlin in Hollywood.
Jim
Yeah.
Kierstead?
I think so too. I was waiting to see what Markus was going to say, and I was going to say people want to laugh, I think. And I don't want to see shows about the pandemic. We're living it. I don't need to do a show about it.
Well, there was a survey done, I think it was in Washington, D.C., that was polling potential audiences. And they actually said that they were not looking for escapism. They wanted to see real, when theater came back, they wanted to see things that had meat on it. They wanted to see really meaty, meaningful theater. So I surprised that, because I would have gone with the escapist assumption as well. And that's only one survey, so there may be others.
And Jim, I'll challenge you. I'll push back for a second. And you know, remember, no one wants to see a 9/11 play, a 9/11 musical, and look what happened. And there was heart and escapism and laughter and substance and come from away. So who knows? But I hear you.
I was kind of teasing a little bit. I think for me, I don't want to see necessarily a show that's like miserable, but if it's about a family, you know, who are in their home and it's about that, like, I don't want to see a show about the pandemic, but I don't mind seeing the shows that are with that reference. You know, I think that's kind of cool, actually. And it would be very interesting to see, right? Like right now we're watching film and whatnot that's been filmed before. So everybody's close, everybody's like eating, everybody's hugging, everybody's touching. And I'm like curious, like after this happens, when the film catches up and we see new pieces that are filmed and on the stage, like what is that? Because now this is a reality for the entire planet. So the shows are probably going to have to reflect that in some way, you know? It's like, and then it's also going to mark it as a period, because it's going to be like, oh, well, in 2020, that's what happened. And now they're writing new plays that are based in that period. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that all fits in, I think. So I think everything, Markus, to speak to your point, to also say, I was kind of kidding before, but I do think everything we're going to see is going to have some lens of being seen through this experience.
Yeah, indeed.
I think there are ways of communicating the whole idea of isolation without it being about COVID. And that's another thing I wanted to say about content for virtual presentations. Look for pieces that actually are dealing with things that are inherent in what we're doing, which would be plays about separation or isolation. I think that those would actually do well. Also, I've said this before, but solo performance is particularly well suited to this medium, although some solo performers sort of shy away from it because they have to rethink what they do. You have to rethink for this medium. This is a medium unto itself. You can't just plop something in here without thinking about what it is you're doing and there are frames. You have to think about what it is and make sure that something is suitable for what we're doing here. So,
Bob,
yeah.
I'll add one more thing to this. Like, what do people want, and where are we going to be next year? You know, this is somewhat obvious, and the field has already been moving in this direction, maybe for a couple of decades now, in terms of theater embracing theatricality and doing something different than television. And theater has embraced theater more and more over the years, but even more so now. What theater and what stories will embrace the idea of being in a room together? Because we're going to be so hyper aware of what makes theater special when we come back into the room. It's like, why go into the theater, then have a fourth wall and have us here and the theater there? It's like, no, we're in this together. We're at this event together, and theater that embraces that experience, I think, is going to thrive as well.
Jim Morgan?
I like that idea. I'm not quite sure what it means. Can you take it a step further?
You're talking about interactive theater?
So not necessarily even immersive, but just how the story is told. You know, are we afraid of a narrator, or are we okay with a narrator that stands and talks to the audience? Do characters break the fourth wall and acknowledge the audience being in the room? It's the Brechtian awareness of the fact that we're gathering together, that the audience isn't merely a fly on the wall with a telescope looking into the secret world, but there's a shared space, there's a shared community. that we're aware and acknowledging the fact that we're in the room and breathing and sweating and laughing together. Just that aesthetic in whatever form that takes, I think.
I see.
Jim Kierstead, any thoughts about it?
What?
Jim Kierstead. I'm trying to remember the last names now.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that it's going to take on a whole different vibe, and people will be. You'll have the content is really important to fit this. You know, if you're doing virtual, and I think in the future it's going to kind of morph into something. You know, as a result of this experience. So it'll be interesting to see what that ends up being. You know, we're right at the very beginning of it now.
I know that I'm depending heavily on the sophistication of your crystal balls, but I do want to ask you another question. Given the fact that we have suddenly invaded the virtual world with theater has invaded the virtual world, a computer world that is pretty much second nature to the younger generation and younger theatergoers. Do you think that we're engaging a younger audience now, and do you think we'll be able to keep them later? I see a no. I see a hearty no from Markus.
About a younger audience, I think it's about content, and I think that what happened years ago was, you know, when Broadway was going through its sort of horrible years in like the 90s and whatnot, is there was this moment, and the not-for-profits, right, the paper mill, all these places were going under, and it was because their subscriber base was getting older. They were like getting older, and unfortunately they weren't able to go to the theater, or they were disappearing. And the younger people weren't interested in a lot of the pieces. They thought theater was boring. They were like, I don't want to go see sound music or something like that. You know, we love sound music. I love sound music. But the kids were not into it. And the audiences who really loved that stuff were just not going to buy the tickets anymore. They were not on the planet. And I think that the time that we started reinventing theater was back then, and it started out being the jukebox musicals, right? So it's like you had all these jukebox musicals. Most of them were terrible, but they were trying to appeal to the mass audiences. And then people started saying like, yeah, cool. But that was the first step, right? We realized pretty quickly that the majority of jukebox musicals were not all that good. In fact, some were horrible. But then they started saying, hey, let's do something modern. Let's make theater be a modern thing rather than something for old people. And that's where, you know, like the Wicked and the Angela Weber stuff in the beginning, right? That was really appealing to a younger group. Now we have Dear Evan Hansen, we've got Hadestown. These are shows that are just so modern and so appealing to the younger audiences. And I think there's this diehard legion of young theater fans who were created, and, you know, with Be More Chill, right? It didn't do well on Broadway, but boy, that show did well off-Broadway, and those kids loved that music, and they willed it into existence basically just by all those downloads of the music. So I think kids will embrace virtual, and I think that kids, there's this legion of theater kids who can't get where they need to go because they're relying on their parents to fly them or drive them to the big city or to New York or wherever to see things, and their parents aren't going to spend hundreds of dollars on one ticket. But if it's virtual and they have a way to see it on their device, that's where these kids are watching their material for the most part. It's really incredible. You know, we have all these big screen TVs that we worked up to, and now we're back to a little telephone that people are watching stuff on. So I think that kids will like it, and I think it's going to be content that draws them in if we figure out what that is. And like I said before, we're just sort of in the very beginning stages of what this is going to be. But I think we'll make a few errors along the way, or maybe a lot of errors, and then we'll kind of figure it out.
So we have an advantage in reaching out to younger audiences, but we have to make sure that the content will attract them as well. So is basically to summarize.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's shows that well, it's a good summary point you bring up. So like if you do content that the kids don't want, then the kids are like, I don't care about theater. If you do kids that only the kids like, then the parents are like, I don't want to see that show. That's kind of what happened to Be More Chill. And then you've got the shows in the middle that embrace both, like the Hadestowns and the Dear Evan Hansens, and that appeals to all audiences. And if you can check those boxes, then you've got a hit. And I think that it's going to be the same with this. I just did this web series, Indoor Boys, over the last 3 seasons. And it's so, I mean, I'm part of it, so I feel weird about saying how much I love it, but I do love it. It's a great show, and it appeals to all audiences. It doesn't matter who you are. And it's just a sweet, good time of a show. So if people can create that as a theatrical experience that can be streamed and on the device, I think it can really open up the world to, stage pieces and that as well. It's building brands.
Well, to be perfectly blunt and tough about it, how do you guys see your companies, Markus and Jim Morgan? How do you see your companies staying vital and thriving, or at least surviving through this? What are your plans? Do you have any ideas about how you're going to keep yourselves viable, your companies viable, and still out there and doing the best you can given the circumstances?
I guess I'll jump in. It's a challenge. I won't lie. We've been hit hard, just as we all have, fellow artists and other companies. It's rough. It's brutal time. We NewYorkRep will stay vital because we work on material that is relevant, that is responding quite literally to the moment that we're in. I know we'll stay relevant because of that reason. We're also lucky that we're not brick and mortar. We rent space. So NewYorkRep expands with the production and then very rapidly contracts until it's myself and my executive director, general manager, our board. So we don't have a lot of overhead. So we will survive, but we're one of the lucky ones. My heart breaks for so many of our colleagues that I think are going to face real hardship moving forward.
Have you just out of curiosity, have you been able to apply for payroll protection program loans?
Yes, we were not successful for it so far. We're still working on another round, but we've kept everyone that was supposed to be employed, which is nice. So we were less qualified for it because we weren't as eligible as other companies for it because we could contract very easily. So there wasn't folks on payroll that we needed to prove should stay on payroll. So we weren't as eligible.
I went through the application process and none of that was asked of me. So we were able to get it.
For True?
Yeah, for True, yeah.
Oh, God.
You should be able to get it. If we could get it, you should be able to get it. I don't understand it. Jim, have you
maybe you
applied?
and I can sidebar after later in the week.
We'll talk about it. Jim, have you applied? Jim Morgan?
Yes, and we were very lucky. We have a very smart board and general manager and executive director who all worked very hard, and we got both PPP and EIDL. I'm not still sure what EIDL stands for, but it will help us a lot. What?
It's a loan, and it's something that's
and
beyond
the
the payroll.
Arrived, and so we are among the lucky ones, and it will help a lot in terms of us moving forward and staying alive until we can be producing again.
PPP is generally for most of us going to be a forgivable loan, and EIDL does need to be paid back as I understand it, except for the first
for a very long period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jim Kierstead, do you have a company that needs to be functioning now and has a payroll, and have you applied for PPP?
No, fortunately, I don't have to do that. I have another job. I have another career that I do as well. So that's kind of where I keep the lights on. But no, I know it's been really hard for folks, and I feel my heart goes out to actors and people in this field because a lot of them they're working as waiters and waitresses as their second job. So they lost two jobs at once. It's really horrible.
Well, thank goodness that there have been some efforts made by our government to help us out, and it's been very useful, very helpful for me personally and for True. So we're surviving. We are getting through this. I also thought it was very interesting. We did our first virtual play reading series last week, and at my first feeling was yours, Markus, which is like, I don't want to try to do this virtually, but we did it, and we were successful. And just to touch on the equity issue, if you're a not-for-profit, you have the advantage of being able to use the benefit agreement through Theater Authority. So there are more things that you can do that are affordable. We were not only allowed to, but encouraged to raise money and actually be a benefit when we did our play reading series. And they were very specific with us about, if you're going to be doing this, we want you to raise money for your company. So we did it with a pay what you can donation, and we brought in a lot more money than we normally would ever have done if the reading series had been done on the usual staged reading agreement. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The Theater Authority benefit agreement is it's a godsend in many ways. It's very, very useful, very helpful. Jim, have you looked into that?
Yes, yes, we've done a lot of things with them, and we have several things in the works. We have not done anything with it since all of this began, but we have a number of things in the works for the future. Just in case you don't know, and you probably do, with the Theater Authority agreement, benefit agreement, not only can you do a live virtual performance, a live stream performance, but you can actually stream it for 4 days following. It's one of the rare instances where you're allowed to, where they just accept the fact that you're recording it, and they encourage you to keep it up and let people see it for 4 days and maybe raise some extra money. So that's very good to know. I think it's a great resource right now for us. I'm going to open up questions to the room. I know Tony Sciali, you had your hand up a long time ago. Do you still have something that you wanted to ask? Is it so long ago that you forget?
Yeah, I do. So my musical director speculated, and I'm looking for a return speculation from you all, that in the perhaps near future, it would be safe to get a small cast, a pianist and a videographer together in the same room and do a video staged reading without an audience. What do you think?
With an eye to what?
Well, the idea would be to then have a video that could be shown. This would presumably be done under a SAG-AFTRA contract.
Well, this addresses the issue of doing virtual musical performance, which is basically the fact that there's latency, and it's very hard to coordinate accompaniment and vocal. The one thing that people have been doing is having the music director make a track, send it to
I know that, Bob.
No. This is for the rest. This isn't for you, Tony. This is for the rest of the room, and send it to the performer so that they can actually perform to a track that is in their own computer. So that solves that problem. It does become a problem once you're dealing with duets, trios, and certainly ensembles. So then that's why a lot of people are looking into the possibility of recording and then doing post-production editing. So Tony, I think, is suggesting that he could possibly get 3 people in a room at least and record something. Any thoughts about that from my panel, my speakers?
You mean to Tony's question or to what you just said?
Well, to Tony's question first, because he has priority here.
I think a lot of it's going to be about when we're allowed to be in a room together. I know I've been wanting to do some stuff at the York since they have no stuff going on because there's no audiences, but they're not even allowed to get in their building yet because there's a lot of work that has to be done with, I think, duct work. Is that possible, Jim? That they might have to do some duct work. So, I think a lot of it's going to be based on that. I think it's about the limits of number of people in the room, and if you can social distance and be responsible about that and have your camera crews and all of those folks in there. I don't know what phase that is, but I would think it might be 3 or 4, right? I don't think it's past that would be able to have that amount of people and without an audience at least. So I think that's plausible. And if New York keeps going the way it's going and we manage not to get infected by travelers from these places that aren't wearing masks and doing what they're supposed to, we may be in better shape than a lot of other places. So it sounds plausible to me.
Yeah, I certainly hope we are going to continue to be going in the right direction in New York, even though the country is horribly, horribly in the wrong direction. The country is just, we won't even go there. I see Elizabeth Appel, I forget whether you say Appel or Apple.
Appel.
Appel.
I think, I'm very excited. I think Jim Kierstead is the one who talked about the OBS studio.
That was another talk, right? The last,
Yes, and
Yeah.
I've been trying to find you. I couldn't remember your name.
Oh, you found me. I'm right here. Hi.
Yeah, I'm excited because isn't that a platform where you can record and then push what you record into another platform and put it out as virtual?
That's correct. So what it is just, if anybody doesn't know what OBS or StreamYard is, there are these streaming pieces of software, and OBS is actually a piece of software that you download and install on your computer, and StreamYard is a web-based one. So it's a little bit simpler, but it's also a little bit more rudimentary. OBS, you can do lots of professional stuff. So what you can do is, say you were doing Zoom or something like that. You could stream Zoom directly to Facebook, or you could stream it directly to YouTube, your YouTube channel. But OBS is sort of in the middle of that. And it allows you to set up as if you were in like a virtual studio, like say you were in the newsroom or something like that, when you see them flashing to different places and putting backgrounds up and words across the bottom. That's like kind of what that is. And you can sort of create your environment, and very seamlessly you can set up what you want next to be streamed in that software. So you don't have to say, like, let me get Zoom down and now let me put up something else. You can just have OBS connected, and you're using that to connect, like almost like programming that streams from your software. So for example, if you said, I want to stream my reading to YouTube, okay? So YouTube or Facebook or something, you hook your OBS up to that. So that becomes the thing that's going to do the streaming. And then instead of giving your video over to Facebook or YouTube to stream over there directly, you leave it on your computer, and then you set that up, and you can set up title cards, and it becomes just the program and the order of what you want to do. And then maybe you want to talk back at the end on Zoom, and then that becomes like your last thing on the OBS program. And then when you're ready, you just like click through the steps that you want to be streaming, and you're controlling it all from that piece of software. I don't know if that makes sense, but it really makes it so you can program up front the flow of what you want to stream.
So are you available as a consultant to help me do that?
Yes, that's what we do. That's what Broadway.
Oh, that's what you do. Okay.
Absolutely. That is totally what we're here for.
All right. So can I afford it?
Yeah, of course. Please.
Oh.
So Jim, it occurs to me that I need to ask you to do another panel. On July 10th, I have an OBS technician coming to talk about OBS specifically, and we're going to have a panel specifically talking about the best ways to actually do musical works virtually, which is very, very different than doing plays. It's a lot more complicated.
Very different.
So we'll talk about that. What?
What date is that?
It's Friday, July 10th. I have them booked. I can announce it's. Do you know this? I think it's called Theater C. I can't remember it's Attilo. I forget his name, but I'm going to know it by then. I promise you. So and I'll be promoting that and letting you all know about that. It's July 10th. We're going to specifically focus on effective ways of doing musical presentations virtually.
Awesome.
So I see Joel Krantz has a hand raised.
Thank you.
Joel Krantz?
Yes, thank you, Bob. So I had a virtual reading scheduled for my musical. It's a pretty big musical, Ocean in a Teacup, and I was scheduled for the middle of July. And I've been watching what's going on with people trying to make a presentation of musicals, and I decided to postpone it because I wanted to do more of a pre-recorded presentation. I really wasn't being inspired by what I was seeing. So I went out and I bought a portable green screen. and I bought a recording microphone, and I bought a light ring, a ring light or a light ring, whatever. But so I'm trying to see if I can kind of become a portable movie producer, Zoom movie producer. My question is, I guess this is a big question for you, Jim Kierstead, is am I biting off more than I can chew here? And is that something that maybe your company could help me with to get ready for? I have a rescheduled date with Kate Camrata on a Monday night Create Theater performance for now mid-September. And I'm hoping that in that time I can pull together a recorded version of my musical.
Yeah, that's what we do. It's really amazing. Since we launched officially the company like last week, I was preparing it for quite a while, but we officially launched it last week. And I've been getting like 10 calls a day. We're booking like 5 jobs a day to do this sort of thing. So I can totally do that with you. That's what we do, because most people don't want to futz with the technology. They don't want to learn that from the ground up to get these pieces of work recorded. And the whole point, you can go to my website. I can also send you our sheet, with just all kind of the basic information on it. And then it really requires another conversation, because what we could do is there's many ways to do this, right? There's many levels. So it's about finding out what your goal is. And I want you to spend the least amount of money to get the best result you can get, right? So if you're really trying to do a nice presentation that's just going to be, sent out to people that then we do it at a certain level. If you really want to pitch this to the industry and it's got to be a little more shiny and polished, then we do it another level. And we could do it all the way up to, like a Hollywood feature film look if you want it, but that's way overkill. And obviously the higher the level, the more expensive. So we talk and we figure out exactly what's involved with your piece. And then we put together a package and we kind of take care of it with you. And that involves the tech talk. It involves, dealing with all the actors. It involves with getting them up to speed with their technology and making sure they understand what they're doing, and then putting it all together and editing it. And, there's many ways to do that. And it's all just based on what level you need.
Jim, I'm curious, do you do the tech yourself, or do you have somebody who's the tech expert that works with you on this?
I am the person who coordinates. My role is really, I coordinate the art part and the tech part together, because I have my foot in both of those worlds. So I can do that, but I have awesome editors, and I have editors of different levels too. So that's why I'm saying it's really important to establish what level presentation you want, because I don't want to go and give you like a Hollywood style editor if you just want like a really nice polished Zoom meeting that's recorded, but the sound, like my issue is always the sound. And we always would do like a couple of run-throughs. We would do, a couple of recordings so they could edit together in case something didn't look the way they wanted, or somebody said something that they didn't like in one, and they could just edit those pieces together and then make the sound as consistent as possible. So I oversee all of that. And then when it comes time for the editing, I've got some amazing young starting out editors who can do the more basic work, and that costs a lot less. Or then if you really want a beautiful feature film quality, then we work with somebody of that level, and it just depends on what's right for your project. But like I said, it's always about guiding you to the lowest level that meets your specification.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Gloria Rosen, your hand is raised. Do you want me to unmute you? Gloria, you've disappeared. Where'd you go?
I got it.
There you are.
I got it? Great, okay. Yeah, I'm having the Marsh Theater has booked my show for a 20-minute presentation. I normally have an interpreter, which is really not possible on Zoom, just because of the balance. But is it possible to caption one of these things?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That would all be done, during post-production, during the editing process, but for sure. It would almost, it'd be like closed captioning, right? That's kind of what you're talking about?
Right. It's going to go out live, so I don't think it's going to be captioned as it's going out live. But if I get a piece of that, could I just have it then captioned if I want to make use of it myself?
Oh yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Gloria,
Okay.
It's the biggest part is like getting the captions in. You know what I mean? But it's not hard though. It's just a little work.
Gloria had another question in previous meetings, which I think she could ask now too, which is she also uses a signer, somebody who signs.
Well,
Can you create a smaller screen? She wanted to know if she could have her signer on a smaller screen than her performer.
yeah, the interpreter, because with the Zoom, the person's going to be the same size, and there's really not even room to move around. So it doesn't look like an interpreter is even possible on one of these, home Zoom things.
Well,
And the Mark really didn't.
Oh, sorry, you're still talking. How many are in the cast? Is it one person or is it multiple?
It's just one. It's a solo show.
Well, you know what you can do in that case? I mean, you could literally, how you've been watching probably the governor and all those folks, and it's like they're on the screen and then they've got the signer in like a little box on the corner.
Right.
You could do something like that if you wanted, and then just be in the lower corner or something.
But that's not Zoom, is it?
Well, here's the thing, right? So this is where the editing comes in. So Zoom becomes about getting your raw footage, right? So this is why I'm a really big fan of the editing process. Unless you're just doing some quick little table read and it's just going to be so you can listen to it again. If you want any production of quality, it's always about recording it. So there's many ways to do that, right? So one way is through Zoom, and then we get our typical boxes. And then you can have a Zoom presentation if you want. Now, if it's one person, you can go and have the box, and then you could literally have your signing person, right, watch the video of the performer on their iPhone, and then record themselves doing the signing while they're watching the video. And then the editor, through the magic of editing, they edit that signer's video into the bottom corner, whatever parameters you decide on, of the main screen. So it's not really Zoom looking. It'll make it just look like a TV show or a film or something like that. So that's one way. There's many ways to do it, but that would be just off the top of my head a way to do what you just said.
Well, they wouldn't be able to hold a phone and sign at the same time.
No, but there's wonderful, beautiful little devices that you just put on your desk, it holds your phone, and it records you. In fact, I don't know if you saw that little ring light thing that I put on. I think it's probably the first comment on this whole group chat. I found this great ring light on Amazon. It's $25, and it comes with a little stand. It's a ring light with a ton of different settings. And then they give you this second thing, and it's another little tripod, and it's for holding your iPhone. So that's what you use.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Could you put that information
Sure.
in the chat? Except I'm about to buy one of those things because I need it now.
Yeah, you'll love it. It's really nice.
Okay, we have RK.
Do that tomorrow.
RK Green has his hand up. RK?
Hey there, guys. Thanks very much for being part of this. I wanted to address James, Markus, and Jim. I like new work, working on new, fresh stories, new composers and the like. And I also want to present from a live setting in a theater, a streaming activity that can reach beyond the walls and the seats of the theater. So, James, is that something that you could be working in at New York, or Markus and your team? And Jim, have you been experimenting with that?
Are you referring to like virtual? I mean, like immersive type theater, like environmental theater?
Well, it could be from a theater itself, an actual theater piece in, let's say we'll take a look at the York Theater, only it can be videoed or taped as it goes. Well, not actually taped, but streamed as it goes. And you would have an audience that would pay, theoretically, to see that, but be part of the live experience as well.
Yeah, I think it's a choice, right? Like there's some things about that it's not going to be as polished as an edited show, right? Like a lot of times when you see, like what you're describing sort of feels to me like watching an archive from Lincoln Center or something, or maybe not even that high caliber, because probably you're talking about like either one camera, or if you want a camera operator there, a couple of people switching the shots around. But otherwise, if you're getting into, and again, this is where there's so much variety and it really depends on your choices, or you can have several cameras moving around filming it and somebody actually switching the shots as if you were doing like Tony Awards or something, right? You're like, you've got a live show and you've got all the cameras around and they're filming and somebody's sitting there coordinating which view you're looking at. So that's a totally plausible thing if that's what you're looking to do. But then it becomes, right, it's an expense, because unless you're just watching it the one time, if you want to just stream it live every single night and have these camera people there, that's a way to do it. But now you got to do it every night. So it becomes a little more difficult, right?
Yep, that's right. The idea to do it every night and live. James?
Jim Morgan, I'm curious about your theater. When will your theater be available to actually have people go in and maybe use it?
God only knows. We rent from the church, so literally God only knows. We have heard various rumors, but just today I was told that Cuomo said that theaters have been moved out of phase 4 of the recovery plan. I'm not sure what that means. A new number was not given to theaters, so it just means we're in limbo. Anyway, we don't know when we'll be back in. We would be very interested in doing something like RK was talking about. Maybe working with someone like Jim to handle the technical end of it.
Right.
I think it's a very interesting idea and worth pursuing.
Jeffrey Siegel.
Okay, hi. So relative to what RK was just asking about, the real question is going to be what the unions allow and who has jurisdiction, whether it's equity or SAG. What RK was asking about, the 2016 live stream and subsequent recorded pay-per-view or video on demand exhibition of Daddy Longlegs was a 4-camera shoot that cost Ken Davenport about $30,000 to capture and put out on Ustream. At that time, equity would only allow him to give it away for free. It was such a new idea, this notion of capturing and getting permission, let alone compensating the actors. But there have been other models along what RK is talking about, except there hasn't been a continuous performance model. But I've been trying to work on this for a while, and the question is what equity and SAG will allow. I've gone to both of them, and basically equity's position is if there's a live audience in the room, they have jurisdiction. If they don't, if there's not a live audience in the room, they don't, in which case you can use the SAG-AFTRA new media agreement, and SAG-AFTRA has jurisdiction. What we need to come to is an agreement with both unions where we can have a live audience in the room, stream it, and monetize it, and figure out who has jurisdiction. Have any of you had direct experience in dealing with equity on this question, or SAG for that matter, of jurisdiction?
Equity's not even come up with an equivalent of a 29-hour reading guideline for virtual. So they're way behind on that. And from what I've heard, they don't want to do it until they change their administration, because I guess they're about to vote in new officers or something. So they're holding off until that new team is in place. So that's why, they still haven't come up with a real ruling on it. So that's why, either things are being done right now as benefits. I mean, I assume something will come up eventually, but the SAG thing is sort of the way to go, but it doesn't really answer your question about how do we do something with a live audience yet. And I don't think that's going to be their first thing to think about, because they don't really like this, right? This is not their thing. So it's not been easy. So we're just trying to do what we can do at the moment. I hope someday they figure out maybe a way to do that, but that's not there now.
I've been on all these panels and nobody has touched on a very key point. The question is under what contract does the show originate? If this is a show that's already under equity contract, you then want to capture and stream and broadcast. That is one situation. But if you are developing it for the internet as a pay-per-view experience and it is not under equity contract, you may not have to deal with equity. And that's what I've been trying to work out for 2 years. You put them under the SAG-AFTRA new media agreement, you pay them accordingly. If they're SAG-AFTRA members, they're contracted. And then the only question, which SAG-AFTRA has been 3 months getting back to me about, is can they authorize that with an audience or not? So.
Right.
A lot of this is not known, but one thing that should be mentioned is that in order to do it on a SAG-AFTRA contract, you need a signatory who's approved by SAG-AFTRA. So that's just one thing to add into the mix. You need a SAG-AFTRA signatory. I know people that are actually doing that now. They're letting themselves, they're hiring themselves out as SAG-AFTRA signatories, which seems a little scary to me, but they're doing it. Basically, I want to go back to the name of the panel, Life on Hold and What We Do in the Meantime. And I just want to ask my three panelists just to say a little bit more in terms of what you're doing in the meantime. I know we've answered this earlier, but this is sort of as a summary to remind us of what you said earlier. How are you dealing with this all right now in the meantime, given the situation? What is the lemonade you're making out of the lemons? Jim, I know that for you, Broadway Virtual is one of the big answers. So you've created Broadway Virtual.
Yeah, I'm doing what I can do, right? I'm like, there's a lot of things we can't do, but I'm kind of a believer in, all right, well, I can't do that for the moment, so let me do something that I can do. And I'm choosing to do everything I can. So like Broadway Virtual, I want to help the not-for-profits. I want to continue developing my pieces. I want to, we're all in this together, right? So we just had a meeting today about the Ain't Too Proud tour. It was supposed to start later this year. It looks like it's going to be January at the earliest, and they've got a plan B to pivot to May if they have to, just to keep moving, right? It's like, because they were like, well, we could sit around and say, let's just not do it for 2 or 3 years, but then you lose all your momentum. Everybody kind of loses interest after a while. So they're like, no, we're going to figure this out. We're going to have a plan in place. So when we're ready to go, we're ready to go. And if we have to change the plan because it gets pushed out more, we'll do that, but we're not just going to sit around in our hands and not make use of this time. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make use of the time, and I'm trying to help our not-for-profits. I'm trying to help our artists and lean into all that. So that's kind of what I'm doing.
Good answer. Thanks. Markus, how about you?
Yeah, finding ways we can support the community truly. How can we use our position of power to affect our surroundings? That's where our head is. And again, it's development, commissions, trying to get as many playwrights working as possible. And these Zoom events, these Zoom readings, going back, getting organized, reading, getting to know more work, more playwrights, stretching myself to push myself to read pieces beyond my normal pile and to really expand my knowledge of who is out there. And again, embracing the introspection and embracing the question of why we're doing this. That's really how I'm spending my time right now.
Okay, thank you. Jim Morgan.
Jumping off what Markus was talking about, I'm reading more scripts now than I have in a long time.
That's what a lot of people wanted to hear.
Yes. And it's great. I'm concerned about all the people in the community that we serve, but the actors, I think we all need to really come together in support of them in whatever way we can. And we don't have money to just throw at people or projects, but the actors suddenly have had so much pulled out from under them. And I would like to do whatever we can to help solve that situation. I'm not sure exactly what I'm saying. And it's true of all artists in the theater community, writers as well. Anyway, it's just all part of this big conundrum. How do we best use this time to everyone's advantage, hopefully we will all survive, or maybe we will change to something totally new out of this experience. Maybe we will have to. Maybe in 6 months, we're still not back in the theater, and we will have figured out a totally new approach to what we do, or we will see what happens. It's scary. Anyway, I don't have a wonderful answer.
Well, that's I guess you're going to have to get your crystal ball fixed.
Yes.
Right.
It's been on the blink.
Yeah. No, that was good. I appreciate it. I want to add one provocative note at the end that will stimulate discussion that we're not going to be able to have, which is that we're dealing with two serious situations in our world right now. One of them is COVID, and the other one is Black Lives Matter, and the whole sudden awareness of, not sudden awareness, but sudden awareness among many, long-term awareness among others, of the systemic racism that's within our culture and perhaps within our business. So I think another thing that we need to think about in thinking about the future while we're on hold now is what the optics will be like once we come out of this, and what will the material be that we will need to support, and what will fly and what won't fly going forward. I think our entire world is shifting, not just from COVID, but from other things that are going on. And I think that we're going to have to shift our perspective and shift a lot of our assumptions about what is needed in the world today and what is needed in our community today. So I just wanted to add that note because it's happening and we need to acknowledge that's happening. I want to thank Markus, James Morgan, and Jim Kierstead for being with me today. And I'm very grateful for your participation and for your generous sharing of your thoughts and your experiences. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you all so much. Pleasure to be here with you.
Guys, you can put your videos on. You can come back into the room now and say goodbye to each other. And I'll hold on to the space a little bit longer. My speakers can leave if they need to, but you could also say hello to everybody. Fran is giving us applause.
Thank you so much. Great show.
Where am I?
Great meeting.
I don't see myself.
Who doesn't see herself?
Me, June. Where am I?
June, I see you perfectly. I see you fine.
Where am I?
You're on a beach with a palm tree.
Oh, okay.
Someone Jonas on.
Hey, Bob, and everyone else, hello again. You know, this is a topic for another panel, I'm sure. And I'm sure, Bob, you've covered this in these sessions. But one thing I want to remember is, you know, I've been going to so many Zoom readings. I've even been registered for 2 at a time. And I've been at one for 5 minutes. And, you know, you move on. You got to swipe left and swipe right. I will admit it. And it's horrible. But I say that in all honesty, because I think now more than ever, the idea of a play or musical having that early hook is so important. I think on page 1, that hook has to be there, because I will pick up scripts and just pick something up and give it a chance and move on really quickly because of the time we're in, because I'm trying to expand my capacity. But I think that hook is so important right now. I just want to make sure I added that into the conversation.
Thank you. A lot of people in the room are artists and writers, so I think a lot of what you guys have been saying, I think, is very heartening for them. I think one of the key things that the person who asked me to do this specific topic.
Yeah, but I'm on the beach.
You're on the beach. The person that asked me to do this specific topic wanted to find out whether you guys were reading more scripts now, and the answer is yes, and that's great news for so many of us. I think I'm going to go back and finish my play and send it to one of you.
You know, and we're all lazy too. It's like, you know, reading scripts is daunting and it takes a lot of time. And some people can whip through a script in 2 hours. It takes me 8 hours with snaps and notes. And so having the Zoom as a device of development is a nice, easy way to work against folks' laziness, including myself.
So guys, be careful if you have background noise, put yourself on mute so that it doesn't interfere. But most of us are in quiet places. So you can have your audio on.
Bob, can I say something?
Sure.
I just wanted to mention, hi, it's Robin. I have a group on Facebook, Theater Loving Mom, Lifelong Theater Lovers. I changed the name of the group, Lifelong Theater Lovers and Supporters. And for those of you who are not in it, I invite you to join. And it's a place where you can share what you're working on, share what you need. If there's casting or some kind of show you're doing that you want to promote, I would love to have you in there. And please feel free to share away. It's Lifelong Theater Lovers and Supporters. And there's a lot of industry people in there. We have over 600 members.
RK, can you share what you just wrote in the chat? I think it's interesting. Are you still there? It's been a real tussle with AEA. Chicago Loop theaters that had shows running at the shutdown were able to stream only to as many audiences as they had seats. So there are rules and regulations that Equity does have. They haven't really solved everything for us. And they still don't know. I don't think they have final answers for a lot of this yet, which is kind of sad.
This is Joan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
One thing that, Joan Lyman, one thing that no one has addressed is most of the things that I've been seeing are free. There has not been a charge for them. There have been a few that do charge. What about the pricing mechanism? If we're going to do this beyond COVID when things calm down, how much are people willing to pay to see something that isn't live theater, that might have glitches, that isn't really what they think of when they think of theater? Because that's something that I'm struggling with now.
We're learning that. We're all figuring that out. Basically, I've been doing everything for pay what you can, and I've had pretty good results with pay what you can. I've had people who donated as much as $100 to come see one of my readings. The average, I would say, the average donation for our readings, which might be a clue, is I guess around $15 or $20. A lot of us need to be able to charge more than that, and I think Jim Kierstead can basically create product that will bear a higher ticket price through post-production, but I'm not sure what we can do live right now.
Yeah, the live is still tricky. It's sort of like good to fool people into thinking it's live. You know, that's the fun part about it. But but the editing is so important. And there are a lot of people out there right now, and I'm starting to do some projects for them who are asking for a series of shows that would be good for a theater audience. So like think of a Netflix or an Amazon Prime or something like that. But now just think of it focused on theater. And that doesn't have to be a play or a musical. That can be like a reality show. It can be shows that are unscripted. So there's people who really want to create those types of platforms, I think. And I think that this is the very beginning of that.
I want to give a shout out to Maureen Condon, by the way. Maureen was actually the person that got me to do this panel. So thank you, Maureen, for your suggestion.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you to all the speakers. It was wonderful.
Did we answer all the questions you asked?
Yes, I think you did.
Okay. So everybody, thank you very much. Any other, I think what my therapist used to call it a doorknob conversation. Things that you think of as you're leaving the room. Anybody?
Yeah, I'd like to say something, Bob. You mentioned maybe a provocative thought, and I think Markus was talking. Well, each Jim and Jim were on my radio show a week ago. I brought in a guest who runs an anti-racist school and a newfound school, African-American woman. And I found myself reflecting on my early childhood when I found that I was myself judgmental and racist. So recently, I figured in my quest for honesty, I went on a reading on Friday, and I shared myself and my story. I probably cried more than I really wanted to, but I encourage us all who are working in this new world that Bob, you mentioned, that's changing, not because of COVID, but because of civil unrest or whatever, that as we develop this material, we look in ourselves. And maybe I found that what I did was very cathartic for me, and it was sort of a different person than I am now. But I'm glad I got it out.
So basically my major point is that we're so focused on COVID that we're forgetting that the world is also changing in other ways. So I think we need to all be mindful of that. That's it. That's all I got today. I'm going to have to go cook dinner. So everybody go have dinner if you didn't eat already.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mark.
Nice to do it.